Welcome everybody to Unsheathed Sword Reviews. I'm John.
I'm Vic.
And today we are going to talk about the Tod Cutler Cleaver Falchion.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. This feels vaguely familiar. I can't really figure out why.
Yeah, so thank you guys for joining us on this review. Should be noted that we are in our brand new studio, which is still a work in progress. Not its final form. Just filming against one of the racks right now. We're still in the process of setting up what will be the main sword wall, but we needed to get this and a couple of other reviews out quickly. So still good times. Still don't think it looks too bad.
I would agree. And we're interested to see how the quality comes out with audio and everything. So
yeah, if you notice like a giant difference, let us know. We're going to be probably tweaking some stuff, but it should be better or at least as good.
Absolutely. So one thing that should be noted is we had already filmed this video one time. Yeah. Unfortunately, the audio file got lost, and so we had to do it again. Yeah, because or else we would just be giving you the audio from the camera, and that would sound like crap. So.
Yeah, we did film this before I moved. That's the other thing. I just moved house, hence the new studio. For those of you that have moved recently, that sucks, doesn't it? It is not fun.
It is not any fun at all, definitely.
Yeah, so that's why this is taking a little bit longer than we would have liked to get out, but hopefully we'll knock it out the park on round 2. So.
All right, so it's worth noting that we did not purchase this sword with our own money. This was a review sample that was generously gifted us by Tod's Workshop. And we want to say very much thank you for that, definitely to Tod himself, and also to Lisa and Catherine, with whom we corresponded in terms of negotiating getting it sent here. They were both super helpful and really, gave us a lot of information on when we could expect to receive the item. So it was very helpful to talk to them. Just know that we didn't purchase this with our own money, so it is a review sample. So take that into consideration as we give you our opinions on the sword.
Yes, just so. Unbelievably generous of Tod to send us this. We talked in a previous video about how when we first started this channel, we talked about review samples, and we were like, oh my god, I can't believe Angus Trim would ever send us stuff. Yeah. Also, Tod Cutler would have been on that list. Never thought he would reach out and ask if we wanted to review something. Literally was one of the most exciting days in recent memory for us on the channel.
Unbelievable.
We fangirled out a little bit.
Yeah, we did.
Not even ashamed about it. So yeah, but we are going to be as objective as possible. Like John said, I'm approaching this, and I'm sure John is, as if we spent our own money on this.
Absolutely.
And so we're going to try to be as objective as possible. And thank you again to the entire team there. Like, you guys have been wonderful. But he also didn't just send us a sword. He mentioned in the email, he's like, hey, throw in a little something extra for you. Yeah. We were thinking maybe an eating set or something like small and simple.
Yeah, one of the peasant knives that they have or whatever.
But that wasn't what we got at all, was it, John?
No, it was not.
He sent us this freaking monster.
Look at this monstrosity of a Rondel dagger that he sent us. So this, I mean, first of all, it's just, we'll give you some close-ups. It is terrifying looking. It is gigantic. I mean, it is huge. It is solid. Like, I mean, we'll have the stats for it in the information below, but it is thick, and it comes down to just an absolute 1 micrometer tip. Yeah. Like, this thing is terrifying. It is a force.
Yeah. I have the Tod Cutler Twisted Rondel Dagger, and I thought that thing was a beast. And this is that on steroids. Like, this thing is a monster in the best possible way. We'll probably do a video with this, and I'm going to guess with the other 2 daggers I have, kind of just talk about Tod Cutler daggers in general.
Yeah, for sure.
Get a little bit more length out of that video. But yeah, this is a monster. We will be talking about it more in depth. And thank you. Holy crap. I could not believe you sent us a dagger. Also, it's crazy.
And you can definitely tell from this at the time when people were carrying Rondel daggers because they weren't allowed to carry swords in the town, and it looks like a short sword Rondel dagger.
It's almost as long as the freaking falchion.
It really is nearly as long as the falchion, so it's ridiculous.
So yeah, thank you so much, Tod, and your entire team.
Absolutely. So this is an Elmsley Typology 1A falchion, and it's kind of interesting because there aren't a ton of them in existence in museums and collections and things like that. There are only a few. So let's talk about fit and finish here. What do you think about it?
Okay, so if you guys have been watching the channel for a while, you'll probably know that this is the 4th Tod Cutler sword that we're reviewing. You can check out the reviews of the Grosses Messer, of the Type 14 Army sword, and the Clip Point Falchion. All of those will be linked into the description below. So it's safe to say we have a little bit of experience with these.
Definitely.
We also have, we'll get to in a sec, but experience with 3 different Tod Cutler daggers. So their fit and finish is something we're pretty familiar with.
Absolutely.
And I will say, in terms of the swords, this is the best fit and finish wise, I think, that they've done. I think that the grip is really, really well done. The stitching is all tight. The seam is pretty straight, so you can see it with your eyes, but you can't really feel it very well. Everything is right and tight. Everything looks like it's exactly where it's supposed to be. In terms of aesthetics, really, really unique sword, right? Like John mentioned, it is a 1A falchion, which is a crazy underrepresented, I guess we'd say, sword in the reproduction market. To my knowledge, I think Krieger Historical makes a 1A falchion. I don't know if they ship to the US though. If they do, let me know in the comments because I would love to get something from them. But yes, like you said, there's surviving examples of this type of falchion. As far as I know, this isn't going for a 1-for-1 reproduction of any of those specifically, but rather just something that would have existed in that typology.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting to look at if you're not a sword person and you show this to somebody who's not too into the hobby. It's very different from anything else.
Well, the first thing you think is machete blade, right?
Right.
Which is basically just like convergent evolution, right? You just shapes that work for things.
Right.
So it just happened to develop in two separate places, independent of each other. But I agree with you that the fit and finish on this sword is very different than the other ones. And I think that it's funny if you take the clip point falchion that we looked at and the arming sword that we looked at. Those are definitely of the same. You can they're the same group. You can tell they fit together. Like yes, definitely same maker, same everything. This is it feels like it's like from a different maker. Or something.
It feels at least a notch above the other two. Because again, the grip is almost as good as anything else that I have. The grip is really well done. The risers are really crisp. The transitions to the guard and pommel look really good. The wheel pommel is a nice size. It's a nice shape. It has a little bit of dimension to it. The guard is perfectly great. And we'll talk about the blade here in a bit. But yeah, like in terms of fit and finish, I think this is absolutely a step in the right direction that you want to see this product line going.
I completely agree. And I think the other thing that if you had to complain about those other swords at all, the complaint would be probably they're a little chunkier than they should be. Just probably could lose about, a quarter pound or so. This does not have that issue whatsoever. And that may be more bearing on handling, which we can transfer into now. But you pick this sword up and it feels like it should feel. It feels like it should feel for this. Versus the other ones are probably, to some extent, it's a matter of preference. How heavy do you like a sword? Do you like it light and fast or heavy with more authority? But I think that this one probably hits that sweet spot for more people than the other ones do.
Yeah, I definitely think with the other ones, Tod was specifically going for chunkier representations of that typology, because like in any sword typology, there's a wide range, right? However, to my knowledge, most of the 1As are roughly kind of the same, not size necessarily, but have the same kind of distal taper, same kind of handling characteristics. There's less range, to my knowledge. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, and definitely in terms of distal taper, they're about the same. But in terms of size, there are like the Conyers Falchion is much, much bigger than this.
Yes.
Yeah, so.
And that said, so talking about the machete thing, how it looks like a machete, but those of you who've ever used one know the machetes typically don't have any distal taper at all, and they're very, very thin blades. This bad boy has a lot of distal taper.
Yeah, it does.
It starts at about 6.1 millimeters at the base, transitions to about 2.4 at the very widest part of the blade, so down to about 2.1 at the tip. You could visually see the distal taper very easily just by looking at the spine of the blade. And for that much distal taper on a blade so short, only a 21.5-inch blade, this is about the size of a gladius.
Yeah.
Holy crap, does that make this a maneuverable and agile cutter?
Absolutely. And it's really nice, too, with the blade being as wide as it is at the center of percussion. What you end up with is you have a lot of weight behind it because it's a wide blade, but it's still narrow. So it cuts really, really effectively. Very similar to like the New Way Dao that we talked about from LK Chen. It's got a very similar design aesthetic. Like, again, designs that work, and this is you get a fair amount of mass behind a very thin edge with a very gradual taper away from the blade, and you got a cutter, and this is a cutter. Yeah,
as those backyard cutters among wide and thin equals insane cutting for soft targets, and that's what these would have been used for. These weren't really coming around in a time when plate armor was really a thing yet, so these were designed to be used against light or no armor, really. And for that, oh my god, this thing is an insane monster. And a cool thing about its design also, not unlike the New Way Dao, is because it has such a rounded curve to the tip of the blade, towards the tip. It's not a very acute point at all. That means the optimal range for slicing isn't like here or back here like on some long swords or anything like that. It's really far up. You hit and then draw deep into the cut. It's gonna slice for you and do a lot of the cleaving for you. Hence, it's called the Cleaver Falchion.
Exactly.
You give up a little bit. You give up actually a lot of thrusting for that. This wouldn't be really great in the thrust. I wouldn't want to get smacked in the face with it, but you're kind of giving that trade off a little bit because it's designed to be a slicer, right?
Well, and it makes sense because the people that would have been using this would have probably been wearing chainmail, and so they're going to have a chain shirt on, which you're not going to be able to thrust through anyway.
Right.
So you want to use chopping strikes on their unarmored parts, like their arms, their legs, and then of course for unarmored folks that aren't wearing any armor at all.
Right.
So yeah, like thrusting wasn't necessarily that big of a deal at this point.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
And in terms of handling for me, like I said, it is Azrael. It's fast. Just personal thing. Like I'm used to, one-handed army swords that have a much longer blade. So I was having trouble just gauging distance, especially because again, it's optimal cutting is so far up the tip too. So like I was nicking bottles and stuff like that a lot. So, like I had to make it a conscious decision to like step forward and be, about a step or half a step closer than I normally would be. But damn, dude, if you get the edge alignment right. So should be noted that there's 2 different sharpening options you can get. You can get semi-sharp or sharp. Notes on the website that even if you get sharp, it still requires to be finally honed by the buyer. So the edge was okay. Most Tod Cutler edges are decent enough, not terribly great. Maybe a step below Albion. Which isn't that great either. So like you definitely could get cuts. Like the very first cut that my girlfriend pulled off with this, she got a clean standing bottle cut. But you're not going to do that every time. You're going to be batting them around and knocking them around. And we actually had this sharpened by a friend of ours, John, if you want to tell that story.
Yeah, so a friend of mine, Dave, who this is fun. So my friend Dave, he lives sort of near me, and the place that we sort of encounter each other the most often is at this little restaurant bar in my neighborhood. And so I had made a deal with him that he was going to sharpen this for us, and we were going to give him a shout out on the channel and all that sort of stuff. And we're probably going to take the rest of our stuff there to be sharpened by him as well, because he did a really, really good job. So anyway, he's like, "Oh, hey, I have the sword with me. Do you want to pick it up?" And I was like, "Hey, you know what? Sure. I'm at the restaurant right now. You can just kind of bring it over." And so he does, and then he gives it to me, and I pay him, and I'm happy. And then I realize I walked here. So we can put a picture down in the comments. But those little hooks that there are under the bar, like where most people hang a purse or a coat, I hung the Cleaver Falchion, so it's just sitting there. It's pretty great.
I like almost spit my drink out when I got that picture, because he was literally just chilling at the bar with a sword just hanging there, and I was like, today of all days, if anyone decided to try it, right. Like you would just be like, nay!
It's like walking back down the alley. I was like, let's do it, man. You know what? This sword was used to kill the stopburn worm, pretty much. So, like, I can definitely take out anybody in the alley.
To do some real cut testing. Tod Cutler, motherfucker!
Absolutely.
Well played.
So, yeah, so that was hysterical. And just another cool kind of story about this type of sword, 1As in general. So, one of the famous examples of this, we mentioned it previously, is the Conyers Falchion. And so that is a sword that basically the Conyers came over right around 1100, just after the Norman conquest, and they were granted a land and title allegedly because John Conyers killed a dragon with a sword with this typology. And so it's called the Sockburn worm, right? And so he killed that allegedly and was granted title and lands for that. But even cooler than that is, so that story was very popular in that area in England. And so Lewis Carroll, who wrote Alice in Wonderland, lived pretty near there and would have been very, very familiar with that story. So there's a solid chance that the Vorpal sword from the Jabberwocky poem is based on the Conyers Falchion, which is a 1A Falchion just like this. So that whole 1-2, 1-2 and through, his Vorpal sword went snickersnack. This is a Vorpal sword. And can confirm this is a Vorpal sword because it cuts like a beast.
Yes, this is it. If you've never cut with a 1A Falchion, like it's an experience. It is something very different from anything else we've used.
Absolutely. The one thing I'll say, though, that makes it a little bit trickier than some other stuff is because the blade is so wide, if you lose edge alignment partway through your cut, you'll pop whatever you're cutting off of the stand or whatever, just because you turn a little bit and then all of a sudden the blade becomes a lever and pushes it off.
Right.
But other than that, though, I mean, it's one of the best cutting swords I've ever used.
It is so fun. Yeah. And
fat. I mean, it only weighs, what, 2 pounds, 3 ounces or something like that. So, yeah, it's light, fast, with the point of balances. It still has enough power. It's an impressive sword. I really like it.
Yeah. It's one of those that, while not my favorite style, the Falchion was one that I was really, really curious about. And this might be the funnest Falchion that I've experienced in terms of cutting, next to my A-trim. But that's a very high bar. But the fact that it's, in my mind, is comparable in terms of how fun it is.
Agreed.
That's a testament to the sword, I think.
Completely agree with that, definitely. So another thing to talk about with this sword is that it does come with a period-accurate wood core scabbard, which is really cool. And I will now make that appear with the magic of editing. There we go. It's always a little jarring. So as you can see, it's period accurate. It is wood core, so you can store the sword in it without too much worry about it rusting. It comes with an integrated sword belt, so that's awesome. And in general, yeah, it's really, really just a nice scabbard. And the period accurate part is really neat too.
Yeah, it's a nice scabbard. It doesn't have like a shape or any of the other adornments that some of the other swords in this line have.
But that's appropriate.
But it's appropriate. It looks really, really good. It's cool. Yeah. One thing that I also want to mention, this kind of circles back to the aesthetics and all that, is I'm happy that they're doing different grip colors now. The first run of all these swords were black.
Yeah.
And now this sword and the Type 15, they're brown. And that's really, really cool. I like having changed up of colors. One little thing that I would say, it would be really, really cool if you can get different grip colors to match the different options for the scabbards. Yeah. And I get it, like you're trying to mass produce something, so it's probably a cost thing. I'd pay a little bit more to get the color grip matching the grip and the scabbard. That's just me though.
Sure. So, and it's also, look, I'd considered, because I have the unarming sword, I'd considered possibly having that regripped, in which case I could get a different color on it if I wanted to. So that's always an option. But yeah.
But okay, so like as a whole,
yeah, we
think it's a good looking sword. It's a representation of a not overly produced sword on the markets.
Definitely.
So very unique, very fun. Fit and finish is a mark up in terms of like the other swords on the line.
I agree. I think that the Forge and Tod are more in sync on this one than they've been on any of the other ones. Absolutely.
That said, though, currently it is $668 on Kult of Athena, and on Tod Cutler's website, they're about the same price.
Right. $2 off either way.
Yeah. Doesn't include shipping. And also, if you get it from Tod, you're going to have to sharpen it yourself. Kult of Athena does offer a sharpening service for about $30, which would be worth it. So we're looking in the ballpark of $700+
to get it to your door, with shipping and everything. Yeah.
So what do we think, John? Is this worth it?
I definitely think it is worth it. I think that it is a sword that it's worth having, so it is worth it. But I will say, if it was $100 less, I think it would be better. But yeah, I do think that at the price point it's worth having.
Yeah, I agree. So, we've mentioned in previous Tod Cutler reviews that part of what you're paying for is Tod's expertise and the handling, you know what I mean, is how they feel. They're going to feel and move the way they're supposed to. They're going to be historically accurate. I love the idea that this wouldn't look out of place in its time period.
Absolutely.
And, as someone who can spend $700 on a sword plus, it's not that big of a price ask for me. So I think it's completely worth it. However, you're starting to flirt with high-end money there. And so you're starting to get out of reach or a stretch for a lot of people. And so while I do think it's worth it, I think it's an awesome sword. I love it to death. And I'm very happy that we have an example, because we share custody of this bad boy, that we have an example of this type of sword. I understand that for some people, it's just a bit out of range or a big ask for them. So I agree, like $100 off. If it was in the $600 range, that'd be a lot more reasonable for people.
I tend to agree, but I do think you're paying for what you get, which is worthwhile. And also, like, if this was, let's say you usually buy mid-range swords, like $300 to $400, I do think that this is, if you like falchions and if you like cutting swords, this is a sword that it's worth saving up for.
Yes.
Like, put off getting something else, maybe don't get a couple of $200 katanas or something, and get this. Because it's fun. Like, once you have it in your hand, you're not going to be sad about it. And
it's very unique. Like, again, I don't know if you guys have noticed, we have a lot of swords between the two of us. And this is one that everybody is like, ooh, what is that?
Yeah, like, even just compared to the things on the wall, there's much more sameness here. And then this is just like, what even are you?
Yes. And it's like a conversation starter if you're a sword nerd. And they're like, what's that? It's like, well, sit down. Like, I'm going to talk to you about swords for a little while. So, yeah. And also noted that this is the same price range as the Royal Armouries collection from Matt Easton Windlass. So it feels appropriate. It's just, inflation's making everything expensive. So that's part. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, definitely a buy from me.
I agree completely.
All right, yeah, so that about does it for us. Absolutely a buy. And thank you once again, Tod, and everyone at your team for sending us this sword and being so generous. And thank you guys for watching this episode of Unsheathed Sword Reviews. If you've enjoyed, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. Peace.